Hello, everybody. My name is Reseda. I will be responsible for the English translation of Constanze Jungbloed's talk. And I will just wait a second while you're entering in the group, I will just wait a second while you're entering in the group, I will just wait a second. Please comment in the live comments if you can hear my voice, so I make sure you can listen to me. So welcome. I would like to ask you to comment in the comments where you come from, and we're just waiting the conference to start. My name is Reseda, and I'll be here with you for the next day.
Bom dia, boa tarde e boa noite. Eu sou Mônica Saavedra, professora da Universidade Federal Fluminense, e tenho a honra de hoje poder apresentar e moderar uma palestra no evento da Abralin ao vivo, Línguas Online. Este evento é uma iniciativa da Abralin, Associação Brasileira de Linguística, em colaboração com várias outras associações internacionais, entre as quais o Comitê Internacional Permanente de Linguística, a Associação de Linguística e Filologia da América Latina, a Sociedade Argentina de Estudos Linguísticos, a Sociedade Espanhola de Linguística, a Sociedade Linguistic Society of America, a Linguist Association of Great Britain, Australian Linguistic Society e a British Association for Applied Language. A Abralin ao vivo tem uma agenda diária de conferências e mesas redondas com importantes nomes do cenário nacional e internacional da nossa área de linguística. As transmissões ficam sempre online disponíveis.
So, okay, welcome today to our talk from Constanze Jungbloed, Penning Tongues from the Past, How Does a Language is Born, here at Abralin ao Vivo. My name is Reseda, and I will be responsible for the English translation. Please let me give you some information in advance. Constanze and I tried as good as possible to adapt the length of the Portuguese and the English version. We will see the original slides in Portuguese, and I will try to accompany Constance's rhythm in speaking. Just in case the slides change before I finish the English version, we decided to give preference to the next slide, so I will restart with the text of the next slide. Please excuse possible inconveniences. We try to avoid this as good as possible. At the end of the talk, we will switch to the original sound, listening to the questions and answers directly discussed by Monica and Constanze. Please feel free to post questions in the chat of our YouTube channel. I will forward your questions after the talk to Monica. I would also like to thank Jair Barbosa da Silva from the Federal University of Alagoas, taking care of our technical configuration. Okay, so after this first more organizational introduction, I will switch now to the translation mode, giving you a resume of the information about Constance's CVs that Monica Saavedra is presenting at the moment. Constanze Jungblut did her academic formation mainly in Germany. She studied Romance languages and political science at the University of Frankfurt and the Free University of Berlin, and finished her master's degree with a thesis about the situation of the Catalan schools nowadays in Barcelona. Her PhD and her postdoctoral lecture qualification were located at the University of Tübingen. The PhD thesis concentrated on the tradition of family books, the Catalan language during the Decadencia, followed by the thesis about pragmatics of the demonstrative pronouns in the Iberian Romance languages. Since 2006, she's professor at the European University Viadrina. After having lectured at the University of Passau, Erfurt, and Tübingen. At Tübingen, she was research assistant to the department of Brigitte Schlieben-Lange, a disciple of Eugênio COSERIU. From 2009 to 2014, Constanze was dean at the Cultural Science Faculty of the University Viadrina in Frankfurt-Oder. And since 2019, she is the director of the Center Borders and Orders in Motion of the same university. It is a center involving interdisciplinary research about borders, migration, and conflict with many national and international research collaborations. This year in October, the Center will be holding the 6th annual conference of the Cultural Science Society. This conference is prepared together with the Polish partner university in Poznan. Constanze is very active regarding cooperation of academic exchange, starting with the bilateral project led by her, Monica, and Constanze with the title Etnicidade em Movimento, Transculturalidade entre as minorias de imigrantes europeus no Brasil, which means ethnicity in motion, transculturality amongst the minorities of the European immigrants in Brazil. This project works also as a basis for double-degree PhDs, the only ones of its field, and between 2015 and 2018, there were written 12 PhD theses, 6 from the Brazilian students and 6 from the German ones. From 2014 to 2015, Constanze had another DAAD project with the University of Barcelona, the Università degli Studi di Milano Bicocca, University of Chemnitz, and Philipps University Marburg, called Beyond Language Boundaries, Use of L1 and L2 in Multilingual Contexts. Since 2003, she's working together with the University of Bielefeld, Germany, and the Georgian University in Tbilisi on a project about linguistic transformational processes and ethnic identity of the migrant languages. And finally, the project from 2000 to 2003, coordinated by Professor Ataliba de Castilho and Brigitte Schlieben-Lange, and of course Constanze Jungblut, including 5 Brazilian and 4 German universities. Just let us mention some publication. For sure, it's not possible to cite all publications. There are a lot of individual ones, collections and articles, but I would like to mention a few. So if you want to see the complete list, please check Constance's page linked to the University of Viadrina. So I would like to stress some volumes with the following titles. There's the one Beyond Language Boundaries, Multimodal Use in Multilingual Contexts, which is from Youngblood and Fernandez from 2016. There's another one which is called Linguistic Construction of Ethnic Borders by Rosenberg, Youngblood, and Zinkan Robodis. And finally, there's a collection edited by Constanze Jungblut and Monica Maria Saavedra, published by Peter Lang, entitled Linguistic Construction of Social Boundaries, Identities and Belonging, where the double-degree PhD theses are published from the ProBrel project. So since 2015, there were 5 publications, 1 per year. Beside all these presented subjects, currently Professor Constance is working on a very interesting project about the initial contact of Portuguese with African languages, which will be the subject of her talk today. We will now wait Constance to start her talk. Please let me know if there's any problem with the sound. Jai, as I already told you, and I thank him so much for his presence, he is here and he can help us to fix some if there's a problem. So I will now wait for Constanze to start. Constanze, it is a great pleasure, a unique opportunity to talk to you today. I really thank Monica Saavedra for the kind presentation. I also thank Reseda Streb, who assumed the synchronization in English. She does the cultural coordination at the German Culture House and is guest lecturer at the Federal University in Ceará. In this way, we hope to ease the inclusion of people of other countries other than Brazil. I also thank the initiative of Abralim to organize this platform with so many interesting talks, unfolding a huge range of aspects of our field, the linguistics. As my colleague from Zurich, Johannes Kabatek, already mentioned, since about 25 years, Brazil, the Brazilian linguistic world, offers us, linguists from Germany, an important experience of collaboration. Linguists who work with different theoretical backgrounds join each other with the objective to unravel together several mysteries of our field. The common idea was to develop a correct interpretation of the data of different corpora of Brazilian Portuguese. To be honest, it was in Berlin in the midst of the 19th when I met Marta Scherer. We will soon clink glasses on the 25th anniversary of our friendship. I also thank Atilaba de Castilho, with whom I learned a lot, not only about the history of the Brazilian Portuguese. Now it's about 2 years that the colleagues Maria Lúcia Andrade from USP and Valéria Severina Gomes from the Federal Rural University of Pernambuco published the 7th volume of the series PHPB on the subject of discourse traditions. This topic was especially prominent in our German-Brazilian collaboration in the context of the ProBrel project between 2000 and 2003 that Monica mentioned, connecting the 7 universities Unicamp, USP, UFP, UFMG, UFRJ, UFSC, and UE with Tübingen, Munich, and Leipzig. Recently, I'm leading a CAPES DAAD project for double PhD degrees about the subject ethnicity in motion with Monica Saavedra and Thelma Pereira from the Universidade Federal Fluminense and my alma mater, the European University Viadrina. My formation nowadays is threatened with extinction. To parenthesize, philology of Romance languages. At the Free University of Berlin, I had the opportunity to study the Portuguese and the Spanish languages outside of Europe. This career was called New Romania. The most common subject in this language, in this context, are languages in contact. To be honest, my talk will unfold a part of a new project called Connecting Europe and Africa in Early Modern Times, Communities of Practice in the History of Portuguese, between 1425 and 1521. As research localities, we've chosen Cape Verde, the former capital Ribeira Grande, at the beginning of the modern age, which is close to the new capital Praia at the Isle Santiago, and Elmina, located at the so-called continent, nowadays being part of Ghana. The research team is built of Dominika Svolkin at the University of Cape Verde in Praia, expert of spoken language in Cape Verde, and Nana Aba Apia Amfo, ex-directress from the school languages, now a Humboldt Fellow and Vice President for Student Affairs at the University of Ghana in Accra. Being expert on language contact and pragmatics, such as me, we three collaborate in this project. This talk has more an explorative character than a completed one. It's just 2 years of research, and it's still a long road of documentation stored in the Portuguese National Archive. The corpus is built upon manuscripts waiting for us at the famous Torre de Tombo, and also at other archives in Valladolid and Rome. The principal thesis that I will defend is that all languages emerge from languages in contact, and the role of the interlocutors is fundamental in this process. The beginning is made by the gathering of people with different primary languages, but to conclude its process, the cooperation between generations is needed. Starting from the perspective of historical pragmatics, the case of the Kust-Portugees is an example for the emergence of language in a wider sense. Every language is activity. The language is social practice between speakers. It appears out of contact of the reunion between people. Interlocutors of first and distinct languages have the capacity to create a new code, a new language between them. New speakers practice languages as a second, third language, or simply as a foreign language. The reason of people creating a community of durable practice are based on the practice itself, being this the exchange of objects, the repair of ships, and mainly the sealing of the shell, among other things. So, to achieve agreements about certain objectives and the coordinated steps during the way, they need to communicate between each other. Due to the improvement of the techniques and the practice, new technical terms and routines emerge to organize the dialogue between the involved actors. Confronted with the Kust-Portuguese, I think that this language continues to be spoken nowadays, called Cabo Verdeano, national language of Cape Verde, and another variety probably transformed into Creole of Guinea-Bissau. My talk today consists in 4 parts. The human history and the contact between languages. I will talk about the case of Middle English, being maybe the most famous Creole. I will defend the case of the emergence of a whole language family, the Romance languages, also were born through the language contact. Second, the Portuguese maritime empire connecting Lisbon, Cape Verde, and Elmina. Third, the spoken language of Guinea called Kust-Portuguese by the Dutch. And fourth, the varieties of the Kust-Portuguese. The anthropologists' international groups confirm that our species has its own origin in various subdivided and disseminated groups in Africa. They probably used distinct languages. Every way of migration leads to contact between populations that speak distinct languages. It is not a modern phenomenon to have a country with different origins. 45,000 years before the age of the modern human Europe showed descendants from Denisovan and Neanderthal, both quite distant from each other. One more time we have nothing pure, one more time we have mixture, one more time creolization. These gatherings weren't isolated, to the contrary. The contact between the spoken languages of the respective groups shaped new languages, shaped creoles, from Africa to Eurasia, from Eurasia to America. There emerged different ways of speaking very close one to the other. There emerged multilingual populations. Let us remember the case of the Caucasus, known as the European Babel. From the big group of Indo-European languages, I will approach a historical language, the Middle English, an excellent example for a Creole. We will also get to know the Romance languages, creoles based on Latin, amongst them Portuguese. The speakers of languages in contact adapt themselves to each other during the dialogue. With time, the tongues diverge from the ancestors and new languages emerge, citing Enoch Abu, our creolized tongues. This term needs to be applied to all the modern languages. We all have Afro background. We are Creoles. We speak Creoles. We focus now on a single language to show the process of its emergence. Remember William the Conqueror and the Battle of Hastings in 1066? With his victory over the English, William was able to conquer the entirety of England, and because William spoke Norman French, and so did his followers, the language of the upper classes and thus the language of the educated folk became French. Anglo-Norman French became the language of the kings and nobility of England for more than 300 years. While Anglo-Norman was the verbal language of the court, administration, and culture, though Latin was mostly used for written language, especially by the church and in official records. For example, the Domesday Book, in which William the Conqueror took stock of his new kingdom, was written in Latin to emphasize its legal authority. Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales is usually considered the starting point of English literature and the first demonstration of the artistic legacy of vernacular Middle English as opposed to French or Latin. However, the peasantry and lower classes, the vast majority of the population, estimated 95%, continued to speak English, considered by the Normans a low-class vulgar tongue. And the two languages developed in parallel, only gradually merging as Normans and Anglo-Saxons began to intermarry. In this mixture of Old English and Anglo-Norman, that is usually referred to as Middle English. During these Norman-ruled centuries in which English as a language had no official status and no regulation, English had become the third language in its own country. It was largely a spoken rather than a written language, and effectively sank to the level of a patois or creole. On top, though, a myriad of distinct regional usages and dialects grew up, and indeed the proliferation of regional dialects during this time was so extreme that people in one part of England could not even understand people from another part just 50 miles away. It was also during this period, when English was the language mainly of the uneducated peasantry, that many of the grammatical complexities and inflections of Old English gradually disappeared. By the 14th century, noun genders had almost completely died out, and adjectives, which once had up to 11 different inflections, were reduced to just two for singular and plural, and often in practice just one, as in modern English. The pronounced stress, which in Old English was usually on the lexical root of a word, generally shifted towards the beginning of words, which further encouraged the gradual loss of suffixes that had begun after the Viking invasions, and many vowels developed into common English unstressed schwa, like the E in taken or the I in pencil. As inflections disappeared, word order became more important, and by the time of Chaucer, the modern English subject-verb-object word order had gradually become the norm. I'm just waiting for Constanze to change to the next slide. We tried to make the English version a little bit shorter, so we try to avoid to skip information. Okay. Does the emergence of the Romance languages, Portuguese, Spanish, Catalan, French, Italian, and other members of this language family that were born during the Roman Empire show more details of the process how to construct a language, a Creole language based on Latin, so to say? Why didn't everybody of the empire end up speaking standard Latin? Actually, after the lost battles, the populations of the diverse groups became part of the Roman Empire. All of them had their own particular languages, German languages as the famous Franks or the Visigoths, Iberian languages, some of them may be similar to the language spoken by the Phoenicians, just to mention some. Anyway, not immediately, but after a certain period of time, a diglossic society of all those folks were able to handle Latin, or to be more correct, their own way to speak Latin. And one more time, the new speakers of Latin as a second or third language, represent the majority of the interlocutors. Their dominant language shapes the Latin in that matter that after various generations, Portuguese and Spanish had developed distinct characteristics. Language contact is the most crucial factor for the emergence of the huge variety of the Romance languages, all of them Latin-based creoles. All of them may be considered creolized tongues. The map shows the Roman Empire at the moment of its major extension, when the complete coast of the Mediterranean Sea was Roman ground. During the Middle Ages, Latin and the spoken Celtic languages in France were in contact and their speakers experienced long periods of bilingualism. The unequal situation between the languages in contact may be seen through the love gifts in form of mandrels with inscriptions in Latin and the Celtic language Gaulish and bilingual inscriptions. They clearly indicate a diglossic society in this region at the beginning of the Middle Ages. After these findings of the mandrels, the Gaulish language is proven to be of the intimate register. From there on, there were needed many centuries until the Romance languages left traces of their own use in form of glosses beside the Latin texts. Another indicator that favors the loss of mastering Latin is visible at the supreme part of the literate. In this context, more precisely, the priest, the literate clergy. Also, the Celtic Transalpine signs show the use of mixed language where elements of Latin and Greek appear. This as information beside. So, regarding the influence of other languages, especially of Greek, I briefly want to show this slide. The loss of the power of the Romans gets obvious through the change of the capital. With the loss of Rome emerges Constantinople in the east, represented here through the blue star, called the Second Rome throughout the Mediterranean. The Arabian extend their power until the Iberian Peninsula, here in green. The Greek, in yellow, established the Byzantine Empire. The Franks, in blue, dominate Central and Meridional Europe, including the Mediterranean coast. It was in this era that the Romance languages also appear as a written language. The first texts are glosses, isolated words written beside Latin manuscripts. Obviously, those handwritten notes indicate the loss of the competence of the Latin language through the younger priests. It is not just one Creole language that emerges in France, neither in Portugal. The combination of traces of the languages that influenced the new language were different in each place. Here we have a map of the multiple ways of speaking Portuguese nowadays in Portugal. This variety, this cultural wealth is part of the common human patrimony, and it was also audible 500 years ago. Apart from calling the language Portuguese language, the speakers had different ways to express themselves. And they talked the ways their neighbors did. They recognized the way of speaking of people of their village. All the adventurers, seamen, and even the captains did talk their own dialect, and they hadn't any opportunity to get education of the proper standard. Portuguese itself was still in the stage to become emancipated from Latin. We're getting now to the center of my talk. This slide serves as a link. Nowadays, Portugal is considered as the margin of Europe, but this wasn't the case in the 15th century. The new street, Rua Nova of Lisbon, was the first to be paved in Europe. The city was a vanguard in this time. It was at the Rua Nova where the merchants of four continents got together to exchange their goods, information, and to accompany each other. The Rua Nova, the new center of those times, attracted people like the Fifth Avenue does in New York today. To finance the sailboats and other ships of the fleet looking for the route to India via the sea, a lot of people collaborated. Portuguese, Genoese, people from Venice, Germans, amongst them the famous family of Fugger, Hungarians, merchants from Marseille, among others. They learned how to listen to each other. The merchants, and especially the seamen, were speakers of those Portuguese dialects and of other Iberian ones from southern regions like Extremadura and Andalusia, together with people who did talk other varieties of Romance languages used at the most important harbors of the Mediterranean Sea, gathering at the ships to sail for a journey of months with the aim to discover the route to India. There were also interpreters participating, often translators for Arabian, reporters, writers, amongst them speakers of Hebrew, astrology experts, as also experts for the astrolabe and navigation in general. This painting is part of a bigger oil painting which was discovered by coincidence in an archive in England 4 years ago. Based on their knowledge, the two experts of art history, the Swiss Annegret Jordan-Gschwend and the British Kate Lowe, solved in a conclusive manner the mystery indicating that this reproduction of an anonymous painter from Flanders represents the new street Rua Nova in Lisbon. I would like to call your attention to the multiple gatherings between Africans and Europeans. Couples at the King's Fountain, Chafariz del Rey, carry water on their heads. An African priest on the horse, a musician with a Portuguese couple in the boat on the Tejo River, a group of clowns entertaining the audience. Citing Kim, Bruges, Portugal went abroad, interested in conquering trade and exploration as resources of wealth at the cost of traditional resources such as agriculture. This attitude provoked a serious rural exodus. This was one of the places filled hence by the Africans. End of this citation. In this picture, there are women with baskets and jars on their heads, known as the canastra blacks, carrying water, goods, and cleaning the city. They and other Africans were employed as servants at the court, servants of private houses in the city, smiths, craftsmen, sellers in the street, beggars for lords and gentlemen called prophet blacks. Some worked as translators at the sailing ships going south. In those gatherings and interactions, Portuguese prevailed, and soon kings from Senegal sent their sons and daughters and other persons to Lisbon to acquire knowledge of Portuguese and the Portuguese culture. For the Portuguese, this time was a time of migration, a process linked to the so-called discovery as a time to settle in new lands. The change of these two processes followed a fast rhythm in many places. Our research triangle combines Lisbon with the old harbor of the old city, Cidade Velha, nearby the current capital, Praia. Following the sailors' routes, this point of debarkation, important in the 15th century, was linked to São Jorge da Mina, the first fortress and castle of the Portuguese on the continent, an important hub. Nowadays, a city and commercial center in Ghana. Their population calls the place kindly small Europe. In order that you may mentally contextualize in a better way, I think it is important to show the tools that the captains and their teams had at their fingertips to sail. To position the south on the top was quite common by that time. Look at the picture of the St. George Castle, called Castelo da Mina dos Holandeses, at the sea next to the African coast. The perspective of the map is concentrated on the view of departure: Lisbon, Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, a very Eurocentric perspective, right? Our project broaches, as I already said, the first 100 years of the modern century, indicating the beginning of the globalization that we experiment today. The Portuguese were pioneers, vanguards, if you agree. The pillory, the pile, indicates a place where justice is made, including executions. The pillory was the most important sign of Portuguese colonial power, symbolizing the will to dominate. First, look at the white oval on the picture on the top at the right side. The first pillory, a smaller one, may be risen in the Middle Ages after the legal approval by the medieval law at Lisbon through Dom Afonso Henrique. In 1179, there at the place next to the house of Guinea and Mina. Legitimating letter called foral was a royal document used in Portugal. The legitimation turned the council free from the feudal control, transferring the power to the community as future cities. Second, look at the left oval at the photo on the bottom. It's here at the beginning of the modern age, in 1520, at the Isle of Santiago at Cape Verde, where the Portuguese have risen the pillory in Cidade Velha. Third, look at the oval of the right picture on the bottom. There, here in Brazil, the most famous pillory is the one of Salvador da Bahia de Todos os Santos, built in 1543. The older pillories in Brazil are at the sugar plantations next to the masters' houses. It may be around 1550 that the square with the same name, the Pelourinho in Salvador da Bahia, has been risen, warranting a certain autonomy, ready to conduct the community lawfully. São Jorge da Mina received the letter of legitimation in 1486, 4 years before John II from Portugal commands to construct a fortified commercial establishment at the Gulf of Guinea, storehouse to support the defense on land and on the sea of the roots and interests of the Portuguese crown in this region. The facteurs were representatives of the king from Hills da Guinea and responsible for the transmission of information, particular of accountancy. Their memories of their activities reach us through letters and lists preserved at the archives in Portugal. Their correspondence was directed to the loyal employees of the Casa da Guiné and Mina, which a little bit later has been transformed in Casa da India at the times of Manuel I. The Casa da India had the functions of the customs duty, particular responsible for checking waiters and benchmarks. The act to change the name into Casa da India refers to the fact that the Portuguese had found the route to India via sea. In exactly those dialogues, the exchange of messages at distance, the letters saved until today that build the foundation of our research. A difficult work based on manuscripts and careful interpretations that need in-depth knowledge not only of language, but also of the cultural and socio-historical context. Taking into account the effects of the temporal distance of the dialogue, where the place and time from the sender of the message never coincidence with the moment and time of its addressee, I'm referring myself here to Illich. We are seeking for information about interaction between Africans and Europeans. The resources are unequal because the European view is more than dominant, superpotent. We regret the missing documentation in some of the African languages. However, we need to emphasize that the Afro-European gatherings stimulated the desire of the interlocutors to familiarize with Portuguese and to acquire knowledge of the foreign language. A reverse effect may be observed through the introduction of African words in the speech, transmitted via the notes of the writers who felt obliged to explain those to the responsible addressees in Lisbon. Nothing indicates a break of communication as postulated by Bickerton, who focused the process of the emergence of the broken English, pidgin English, or Creole spoken in Hawaii. This postulated break was confirmed recently by McWhirter. My colleague Britta Schneider, expert of the post-colonial situation in Belize, questions this thesis. Resuming, in contrast to Latin America, between Hills da Guinea and Portugal, and finally to India, we have a continuously flux between the people situated in the new lands and the people sailing from one harbor to another, for pleasure or for the necessity to find clean water and food. Searching for help and workers, there were regular interaction with the native people, the Africans from the coast, and rarely with the population of the inland. All of them must obviously be considered as communities in motion. Again, the plurilingual communities on the ships counted many dozens of people, including Africans, totalizing to groups of 100. The crew complement formed a temporary community for 6 to 8 months, depending on the winds. They inhabited together the same space for the whole time. They had to coordinate activities that were repeated after a certain period. Without doubt, the coordination of this work offered excellent opportunities to adapt yourself to the way of speaking of the others and to learn words or more extended expressions like questions and possible answers as supervising instruction and its objectives during the journey and at the harbors. We will just wait again for the next slide. Thank you. Okay, it is necessary to emphasize that there were always plurilingual persons in that community. The experts amongst them are part of the group of brokers, the people that acted as more or less official plurilingual mediators. The translation was made by the turjimãos, a word that indicates the Muslim context from northern Africa. The chronicler Gomes Eanes de Assurara in 1542 still is turjimão, even if we already located the use of the word interpretador in its Chronica of Guinea. Later on, língua, language, is the term for the translator. It is also a period of specialization. The ships were made of wood. Their shells needed to be wax polished. The expert called Kafri needed to seal the openings of water before leaving again and continuing the journey. The work of the Kafris, experts in this technique, was described with a very high prestige. Normally, these craftsmen acted like free men, they weren't slaves. The seamen called grumetes, Africans that knew the flats on the river mouths and the swamps, were a very important group. They worked as pilots orienting and indicating the routes to the foreign captains. This whole context motivated the people to learn Portuguese. Particularly the lanzados, Portuguese and other Europeans living widespread nearby or together with the African tribes at the continent were pushed towards learning the African languages spoken by the respective community. Actually, the report of the Genoese Cadamosto about the arrival of the Portuguese Armada at Elmina with ships full of material to construct the fortress castle Elmina talks about a person of Portuguese origin that was able to handle the language during the reunions and the discussions negotiating the permissions to build this building in 1478. We need to be conscious of the fact that the communities of practice build a network and were interested in communicate amongst each other. The deceased Ghanaian linguist Dakubu confirmed that the use of Kust-Portugees as a spoken language wasn't limited to the surroundings, the family, the private language. To the contrary, the Kust-Portugees was also language of distance and used in public spaces, language of the law. She emphasizes that during the period of the Dutch, the contracts were negotiated in Portuguese, probably Kust-Portugees, but in the end written and studied in Dutch. The most important aspect of this slide consists in the fact that after 3 or 4 generations of Portuguese in Rio da Guiné in 1529, King John III orders to open a school next to the castle. Now there was a place of official instruction of Metropolitan Portuguese, the Portuguese of Lisbon. Beside to learn how to read and normally very much later how to write in Portuguese, the teaching of the Bible and the Christianization played an important role. This doesn't mean that all of the teachers or fathers were real speakers of the Lisbon Standard Portuguese. Anyway, the religious text represented the norm, many times with variation of the letters, like the case of the 15th century. In this circle, there came together fishermen, craftsmen, and traders. It was also a pole for Africans from Asante group and from the Fanti and others. The population grew. The number of mulatto children, the privileged group to attend the school, was also growing. There were Africans from Elmina that did military service in India and fought under Portuguese leadership. Not only the fluctuation of those soldiers had been circular, they came back to the place of departure, their city, small Europe, but also the mulatto children who had the opportunity to spend time in Portugal. There were people from everywhere living in Elmina, African ethnicities, Europeans, and also, but more rarely, some people of Asian origin. The Adinafos, the inhabitants of Elmina, established the rights of the male line of legacy following European patterns, in opposition to the surroundings autochthonous African society where the mothers decided upon the legacy of their descendants. I recommend to my audience who wants to deepen this aspect the book from the historian Nayan Chanda with the title Bound Together: How Traders, Preachers, Adventurers, and Warriors Shaped Globalization. This variety of Portuguese was only few explored and falsely qualified as a pidgin Portuguese. I'm referring to works of the 70s of the 19th century, Bear, Naro, Spencer, and others. I confirm Herculano de Carvalho's approach, shared through my tutor and estimated researcher Brigitte Schlieben-Lange in 1977. I cite: as a consequence, the simplification, sometimes extreme, of the grammatical system of the original language and the restructuration that, with the same significance, more or less modified, transmitted in the same language, create a new system fundamentally different from the original one and sometimes quite complex. It's precisely in this restructuration where we have to consider that a substrate language, African or other, which was the first language of those adults who learned from the Europeans the basics of the new language, may have provided the shape or the form of those significance were organized. End of the citation. The use and the forms of learning reinforce this perspective. The Euro-African couples and their descendants used this language the whole day through. Its use didn't stop with the arrival of the Dutch. To the contrary, the language won hundreds and hundreds of new speakers even after the Portuguese lost their colonial power in this place. It was a fully operational language. It had structural stability, public and private functions, transfer between the generations for more than 3 centuries. We can deduce to the external attributions through the Dutch that recognized that language as Kust-Portugees and who recommended their compatriots traveling to this region to learn the local language used in the squares and harbors of Portuguese Guinea. The Danish did recognize the language as Negro Portuguese. I think we can integrate Kust-Portugees, thus speaking the tongue of Guinea, into the map of Portuguese languages by adding the space of the Portuguese Empire. Actually, Kust-Portuguese is nothing less than another Portuguese variety, spoken as a natural language by the Edinafos in that time. Okay, we can now examine the wide use of the Kust-Portuguese reflected by the following words. They indicate the discursive domination of religion, words like cruz, English wooden cross, or also cruz de caminho, English crucifixion. While casamento refers to the Catholic institution of marriage, the dominion of religion, the calicer, the marriage in African context, refers to celebration according to the African traditions. The calicer fulfills the social needs of the African communities and is conformed with the autochthonous culture. The man doesn't need to annul his marriage with his wife in Portugal, which would be the requirement to assume a new Catholic marriage, But after celebrating the Calicer, he can divide the same domicile and intimate space with his new African woman. Looking at Turgimão appear adulterations from the mouth of non-experts, like Tangamão, translator. There are repetitions like gris-gris, indicating an aspect of the African culture. Gris-gris and crom, African village, aren't listed in the Dicionário do Crioulo da Ilha de Santiago, the Dictionary of the Creole of the Isle of Santiago from Jürgen Lang 2002. Does the context from the isle differ from the continent? Does the language use modified over time cause the loss of the words? I think it's very interesting that the official titles to talk respectful to an authority, African or European, were quite important. The arm to direct oneself to an African authority is used by the Portuguese and other Europeans, as well as, on the contrary, the nodding of the head regarding the European leaders. Both are proven. Politeness and the respective forms of courtesy reflect the societies in contact with equal status that means one alike the other. Finally, I think it's interesting to emphasize that the discursive marker sabi is quite frequent in many so-called pidgins from Ghana, Nigeria, and other places in Africa. It serves to ask the interlocutor's approval and is regularly used to cut the talk into parts, negotiate a possible speaker's change in the dialogue. It's sure Sabi in Kust-Portugees represents the beginning of the way of grammaticalization that we can observe at a more advanced point nowadays in some English varieties spoken in Ghana. Now we will enter in the field of grammar. Moving from the discursive marker to the action to express thankfulness, we need to consider that there are also cases of divergence amongst languages with quite distinct origin. The famous Dasi may be considered as an example. We have Ndasi from the Kwafante language and Dasme from Portuguese. Looking at the formation of new words, neologisms, we come back to the word calicer. In Portuguese, we have this ending in case of the tree and his fruit, for example, maçã, which means apple, eira, macieira, apple tree. The classic or literate Latin has the ending arium, respective arius. It passed in the period of vulgar Latin a process of metathesis and ended up with the reconstructed form iru. It connotes the place of an event, a place of reunion. There are nominal derivations, but there appear also nominalized derivations of a verb that refers to activities practiced in reunion. We have, for example, atolar, to bog down, plus eru, atoleiro, the place where the cars get stuck in the sand. This pattern may be applied to the case of casar, to marry, calicer, the wedding celebration. Finally, I would like to cite one more time a case of politeness. In this aspect appears a pronoun of the second person expressing respect and politeness regarding a powerful African woman. Brooks uses a picture of a place like a clearing dominated by a woman as a cover of her book. As I said before, that time the line of succession followed the female line, privileging powerful mothers. This had been the rule in the surroundings of Elmina, and the huge prestige of African women was recognized by Europeans of that age. Being honest, the influence is obviously African. Looking at the politeness, its expression through the pronominal paradigm, there are societies that limit themselves to simple pronominal forms, like the case of the Anglo-Saxon. With the social change that the society passed in the period of the Anglo-Normans, the social became more complex and the necessity appears to express respect for more frequency also in the second person. The plural pronoun was used to address to a person, the singular, to express the reference to its superior social status. Take a look at the blue beam. From this moment on, Middle English introduced the trace respect in its personal pronoun paradigm. In Kust-Portugees, bu appears as the not labeled form for the singular of the second person. a truncation of the second person expressing respect from the European Portuguese, você. In Rios de Guiné, the people also felt the necessity to express respect. The innovation of the Kust-Portugees is the creation of the pronoun "new" to address a man with superior status and "nha" to address a woman with superior status. This way, the Kust-Portuguese is more complex than the Portuguese spoken in other places. Beside the trace respect, the trace gender is recognized. This usage may be observed even nowadays in Cape Verde. I admit that the complete paradigm is a reproduction of the data from the Dicionário do Crioulo da Ilha de Santiago by Lang, 2002. Society and tongue, though, are inseparable. One conditions the other. Okay, so the last argument of my talk is at the same time my conclusion. There's no need to find it strange that moving communities create various varieties of Cast Portuguese, as many, or we may say in all, languages spoken by many people and being spread geographically. Where are languages born? They're born out of speech communities, and their speakers adapt them according to their practice and their necessities. Being more specific, with more experts, there appear more new words. If the social order changes, the way how to express respect may change too. Prestige isn't anything abstract. On the contrary, it needs to be included in a social role, a social status. It is quite locally and may be experienced through interaction. In our case, the fluctuation of coming and going, a circular migration movement, results in the fact that communities of practice don't experience isolation. It means that the speakers of the varieties were in contact with each other and also had contact with the standard form of Lisbon, a metropolitan form, even if there were only a few speakers of this variety among their interlocutors. Instead of a vertical diagram, I think the representation in form of a Möbius network would be more adequate, permitting more flexibility. I think that the Möbius network without interior, exterior, superior, or inferior with three dimensions visualizes in the most adequate form the coexistence of the variety of Cast Portuguese. It also reflects the moving communities of this age, the first hours of dawn of globalization. Looking at the systematization of the varieties in case of the Cast Portuguese may develop itself into the impulse of rethinking a maybe Eurocentrist view that positions the diatopic varieties in the first place. The human communities always had the opportunity to move. Nowadays, for example, Pomeranian is spoken, Pomeranian is even written in Brazil. There's teaching in and research of Pomeranian in Brazil, but it's not spoken anymore next to the Baltic Sea. Can we say that the social varieties are fundamental? Looking at Cast Portuguese on basis of reading, I can say that there are minimum 7 communities of distinct language routines to express themselves. Cast Portuguese 1, spoken in Elmina and surroundings, Africans, Europeans, Jewish, and foreigners. Cast Portuguese 2, spoken in Cash, Geba, West Africa, the Creole of Guinea-Bissau. Two varieties of wide use by people from different origins. There exist varieties used by members of certain specialized groups with major prestige. This is Cost Portuguese 3, spoken by interpreters called Turgimãos and later just línguas, tongues. Kust-Portugees spoken by captains and their teams. There is a particular group, famous through Peter Marx and José da Horta's publication Forgotten Diaspora. Many new Christians, refugees leaving Spain, a big part from Andalusia, converted Jews passing Lisbon and continuing their way of migration via the Atlantic Isles until reaching the African continent. This is Kust-Portugees Group 5, spoken by the new Christians. At the Isle of Cape Verde is the place where the Kust-Portuguese has become the language of everyone. So, Kust-Portuguese 6 spoken at the Isles Cabo Verdean. In Lisbon, it was the language of one group only, one language amongst others that expressed the social affiliation to the African group settled Africans or Africans that recently arrived. The speakers of all those communities were multilingual. The choice of Kust-Portuguese out of the multilingual repertoires, and all the members of those communities mastered it, represents an act of indicating membership, the pride of their collective affiliation to a certain social group, one eternal human desire, universal. The concentration on a period that is less studied until today allows to adopt a new perspective, a new vision. It allows particularly to start with the groups who were involved in the gatherings. They built practice communities. Their tongues reflect their objectives, practical objectives, but unavoidable links to language. This attitude facilitates to abandon false dichotomies inherent in many research focusing on gathering in colonial times. The desire of belonging emerges as a more important aspect than the one of identity, contrasting many times just us from the others. The beginning of our age, the ways how to act 500 years ago, may tell us countless successful cases of integration of foreign people. I think we need to get to know them, too, in the current context of important migratory movements with big impact everywhere. So, thank you. The penning continues. This is where Constance's talk stops. We will soon change into the modus to listen to the discussion between Monica and Constance in their original transmission, but you have still the possibility to put your questions in the comments and we will send them to Monica. Muito obrigada, Jair. Agora a gente pode voltar para o som original. Muito obrigada.
A hipótese de caracterização da sincronia, na sincronia de uma língua crioula. E realmente, eu acho, esse slide do golês latim mostra um pouco essa interpretação. Tem, hoje em dia, com a gente também bastante multilíngue em todos os lados, quando você está presente numa conversação com gente de diferentes línguas. Então, a gente combina não só uma questão em uma língua e uma resposta em outra língua, mas dentro da questão, dentro da resposta, estão combinando várias, 2 ou mais línguas. Isso que hoje em dia se chama languaging, e eu acho que é realmente a base de criolização. É um ato individual ou coletivo, no caso da conversação, nesse momento, que faz aparecer, mas como vocês vejam, também essas dedicações dentro desses fusos, haviam traços de bilingualidade, de criolização, se vocês querem. Assim que eu acho que é uma competência universal, uma competência que não tem, é só, o mínimo é que são pessoas presentes que não compartilham a mesma língua, primeira língua, é só isso, e depois a gente pode conseguir, se o outro também entende um pouco a língua do outro, então é mais fácil de combinar, porque você tenta de conseguir que o outro compreende isso que você fala, e no momento que ele sabe um pouco do inglês, então você tem mais facilidade de entrar em sua fala do português uma palavra em português, por exemplo. Mas se você está no campus da Beatrina, por exemplo, muitas vezes as conversações são trilíngues ou até 4 línguas, então a mistura entre essas línguas é mais grande. Mas eu acho também, nesse caso do Kust-Portugees, deve ser também uma situação bem multilingüe, porque essas línguas africanas são muitas. E a gente que vinha da Europa não falou só uma língua. O Catamós foi italiano, genovês, não falou português, escreve italiano. Italiano daquele tempo, claro. Mais perto do latim ainda. Assim que a compreensão entre essas línguas foi mais fácil.
A próxima pergunta é de Wellington Santos da Silva. O Wellington fez várias perguntas, eu agrupei-as no mesmo. Ele pergunta: há documentos que indicam a comunicação direta da administração portuguesa no Brasil com a Costa da Mina? Se sim, em que língua isso se dava? E aí ele continua: em outras palavras, o Brasil foi parte da comunidade de prática? Isso tornou a ecologia linguística mais complexa? E aí ele ainda continua: seria possível sugerir que os africanos falantes de GBE, escravizados no Brasil a partir do século XVII, tinham algum conhecimento de português, ou o domínio da língua teria sido limitado à elite local? Ele foi fazendo essas perguntas durante a sua fala, mas aí eu achei melhor agrupá-las todas para você poder respondê-las juntas.
Muito bem. Eu não sei. Eu acho que Cabo Verde tem um papel importante em buscar uma resposta a essas perguntas, porque foi um lugar onde chegaram os escravos antes de sair para a América. E alguns desses escravos estavam bastante tempo no Cabo Verde. Parece que no Cabo Verde esse curso português foi falado naquele momento. Assim que tem pessoas, seguramente de origem africana, que através de mais tempo no Cabo Verde, porque se fizeram enfermos, doentes, quando se fizeram doentes, então não podiam continuar a viagem. Então ficaram mais tempo no Cabo Verde, mais tempo para aprender o português daquele lugar. Parece que isso pode influir. Isso não quer dizer que é toda a resposta. Mas acho que essa comunidade prática foi unidirecional, porque realmente eu desconheço pessoas que voltaram do Brasil nessa temporada, no século XVI, XVII e frente, a África. Não conheço casos que voltaram nessa direção. A primeira foi alguma coisa sobre documentação, como a Costa da Mina. Sim.
Há documentos que indicam comunicação direta da administração portuguesa no Brasil com a Costa da Mina. E se sim, em que língua isso se dava?
Não conheço realmente, mas acho que deveria ser alguma coisa. Pode ser que tudo vá para Lisboa, porque, claro, o ponto de onde se encontraram esses documentos e essa obrigatoriedade de passar as listas, contabilidade, etc., foi essa Casa de Mina, que depois se chamou Casa de Índia no tempo do Brasil, já foi Casa de Índia. Mas estarei atento a esse aspecto quando estamos no Torre de Tombo, em outros lugares, quando folheamos esses documentos, se aparece mais coisa. Obrigada pela pergunta.
E ele ainda pergunta se, a partir do século XVII, esses documentos tinham algum conhecimento, o domínio da língua teria sido limitado à elite local. Você acha que sim ou não?
A elite local, lá em Casa de Mina? Lá em África ou em Brasil?
Eu acho que sim. Pelo que eu entendi, no Brasil, pelos escravizados no Brasil, né? Ele fala. Mas vocês também podem depois ficar conversando ambos, os dois, no chat, né? Isso não termina agora. Vou passar para a próxima pergunta. É de Lorenzo Salvioni. Lorenzo Salvioni cita a recente palestra de Salicó como Fuene. E aí eu aproveito para te dizer que ele foi um dos primeiros ingressantes hoje na sua palestra. Assim que você inicia, ele... Hello, Constance, I'm here. I'm glad you're here. Então, ele cita a palestra de Salicó como Fuene e diz que ele afirmou que nos 3 séculos em que o português foi a principal língua franca ao longo da costa africana, o idioma, mesmo assim, não sofreu um processo de criolização, pois, de acordo com Salicó como Fuene, quem falava o português nessas regiões, nessa altura, era apenas uma pequena minoria de nativos que atuavam como intérpretes e faziam questão de aprender bem e falar corretamente a língua de Camões. Aí vem a pergunta dele. A senhora confirma essa versão? Quer que eu repita? Ou...
Não, acho de verdade que havia uma pequena minoria que sabia falar mais correto ou mais ao tipo de Lisboa o português. Mas isso não quer dizer que não havia muita gente nos mercados e nos portos que se encontraram direito, sem tradução com os africanos e que aprenderam também. Porque resulta que esses times nas naus e nos barcos, as pessoas que formam parte do time repitem, vão cada ano. São sempre uma parte do grupo é sempre o mesmo. Não todo o grupo, não, mas uma parte do grupo é sempre o mesmo. Isso quer dizer que eles tiveram mais possibilidade também de a partir da sua fala portuguesa, que não é a da Lisboa, bem do norte também, bem do lado da Espanha, do Galícia, mais em cima do Galícia ainda, ou mais este do Galícia também. Essa gente não sabia falar a língua do Camões para falar isso.
Como ele citou,
nessa pergunta, não é? Acho que isso se deve estudar mais, porque, claro, quando a documentação é passada pelos escrivães oficiais, então muda, não é a fala que eles tiveram. Só em algum ponto onde falam que é bem complicado de aplicar de compreender essa forma de falar, então aparece um índice que diz que eles não sabiam bem falar a forma de Lisboa.
A outra questão vem de Valéria Gomes, né, da Federal Rural. Constance, dos documentos analisados, quais evidenciam traços da oralidade e da proximidade comunicativa?
Olha, não é fácil de responder, porque oralidade aparece nessas cartas oficiais pouco, não tem. Mas realmente, como eu falei, havia também correspondência dos padres. Esses padres reclamam, sobretudo nos ordens na Europa, em Portugal, mas também em Espanha, Itália, que tem muita dificuldade de cristianizar essa gente, porque eles não falam a sua língua. E os padres ainda não haviam aprendido essas línguas africanas. Mais tarde faz esse passo. E nessas cartas dos padres aos seus ordens, nessas cartas sim aparece, dentro dessas reclamações, exemplos da oralidade dessa gente, mas normalmente como queixando que eles não falam como precisariam saber falar. Isso.
Certo. E a última questão que eu tenho aqui é de Lígia Raspantini. Constance, em seus estudos, encontrou pontos de contato no sistema de língua franca mediterrânea e do Kust-Portugees?
Eu acho que esse assunto a gente discutiu com Calvi, no momento que Thelma Pereira foi também toda, e nos convidamos a Luiz Calvi a participar. Ele é experto na língua franca mediterrânea. E realmente a língua franca mediterrânea não é uma só. Ele também fala, são ao menos 4 línguas francas mediterrâneas que se pode distinguir. Agora, uma delas, uma língua franca mediterrânea com mais elementos portugueses, sim, que tem relação com esse Kust-Portugees que depois aparece. E realmente eu cortei um slide, porque eu acho, pessoalmente, que a Ilha de Madeira teve também uma função bem importante, porque o Henry, o navegador, ele experimentou cana-de-açúcar na Ilha de Madeira, em primeiro lugar, perto da Portugal, onde se experimentou. E os açucareiros são mestres com muitos conhecimentos bem especiais. Também os muleiros, que precisam também nesse negócio, são pessoas com muitos conhecimentos bem específicos. Eles vieram de Chipre, de Valência e de outros lugares. Então, nessas plantações, também são mais ou menos dúzias de pessoas, até 100 pessoas máximo, compartilham o lugar, compartilham o trabalho, compartilham também alojamento, os donos, os escravos, os bérbaros, também a gente de África, porque já havia gente de África trabalhando nessas plantações, mas todo o contexto foi muito mais pequeno que em Brasil depois. Assim que tem possibilidade de aprender mais facilmente essas diferentes línguas. E eu acho que essa língua franca mediterrânea que eles sabiam falar, esse contexto se fez mais português para falar isso. E com esse, se passou, porque, como eu falei, os times também, as pessoas dos times se repitem, são as mesmas. Assim que podem continuar a falar e aumentar o seu conhecimento e assimilar melhor aos outros dentro desse trabalho junto, desses caminhos juntos, dessa ida e desse movimento realmente.
Essa foi a última questão. Eu não sei se Rezeda teve alguma em inglês, ela está me dizendo aqui que não. Mas, com certeza, algumas questões, outras questões irão surgir, o chat vai continuar. Todas as publicações da professora Constance estão disponíveis, eu esqueci de dizer, no site, acho que eu até disse, no site da universidade. Eu acho que, e essas mais recentes sobre a pesquisa que está sendo desenvolvida estão forthcoming, né? Estão chegando, daqui a pouquinho já estarão disponíveis. Constance, eu queria mais uma vez agradecer, em nome da Abralim, em nome do nosso país, em nome de todas as universidades com as quais você teve o prazer, nós tivemos o prazer de recebê-la aqui, de colaborar. E vamos aguardar que essa pandemônio termine, para que você possa retornar presencialmente, pelo menos como convidado aqui no nosso print, né? Temos aqui já ideias de trazê-la para a Federal Fluminense e aí podendo fazer um tour por outras universidades aqui também do Brasil. Mais uma vez eu quero agradecer a Abralin pela live, pelo projeto Abralin Online, e dizer que essa apresentação ficará disponível e a professora Constância continuará no chat para responder as perguntas que venham. Bom? Muito obrigada e um bom dia, boa tarde e boa noite a todos.
Boa tarde. Muito obrigada a todo o público participar. Muito obrigada.